West begins in Fort Worth, Texas, to around the globe. You are listening to Talk of the Night. And now, your host, Paranormal Phil. Thank you, and good evening, good morning, wherever you may be around the world, around the globe, or even in your own backyard. I am Paranormal Phil, and later on in the show tonight, we're going to be joined by my guest, Nick Pease, as we talk about life after death. But first, up on the Talk of the Night website, under Story of the Day, man sees with his mind in life after death claim. A man believes he has the answer to the age-old question, is there life after death? A man named Jamie believes he saw the afterlife after having a cardiac arrest in which he temporarily died. He wrote about his experience to the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, NDERF, saying he had the cardiac arrest after a serious injury to his hand that left his bones exposed. Right after the incident, Jamie said his body shut down and he closed his eyes. He believes he crossed over to the other side. He claims that although he could not see, he could interpret everything around him with the power of his mind. And of course, you can read more about that story up on the Talk of the Night website by clicking on the link below the story, which comes out of the UK, which is where my guest is from tonight. But let's talk real quick about my guest, and we'll bring him in. So, Nick Pease was born in Windsor, England as a child. Nick could hear and later see spirits, so begin his ongoing lifelong quest to discover more about the nature of the existence and the reality of life after death. He gained a degree in philosophy, developed as a spiritual medium, and continued to take an active interest in the dilemmas between religious and scientific knowledge. As a fast-paced, thrilling novel, Revelations draws on Nick's lifetime experience and spiritual perspective on life and asks the fascinating question, what would happen if someone really could 100% prove life after death as a scientific fact? So please welcome my guest to the show, Nick Pease.
Hello. Hello, Phil. Good evening, everybody. Actually, for me, it's very early morning in the UK, but it's lovely to be with you.
Yep. Great to have you. Now, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, as a child, a very young child, I could hear spirits. In fact, there was one very particular spirit I could hear in the house I lived in with my parents and brothers. I was only 5 or 6 at the time, and readily admit that it terrified the life out of me because I didn't know what was happening, because it was out of the normal, shall we say. But it was undoubtedly, I could hear the footsteps. It was clear as anything. It was undoubtedly human. And that kind of set me on a path of wondering, well, there's more to life than meets the eye. In fact, I put in my book, Revelation, the first page includes that famous Shakespearean quote from Hamlet, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. And I guess as I started to grow up, it wasn't until I was in my early teens that I started to actually see spirits as well. And it just sent me on this quest through my life to say what we're being given by people in terms of the knowledge that's presented to us isn't quite enough, because people don't talk about these things generally. And so I went on this lifelong quest to discover more about the nature of existence and the fact that life after death to me is an absolute reality. I developed as a spiritual medium at the Spiritualist Association of Great Britain and have spent my whole life, and will continue to do so, seeking for further knowledge. I don't actually call myself a spiritualist, though, Phil, because I just find labels divide us so badly. I try much more to be a free thinker. I accept all religions. I accept all people of all faiths or no faiths. But I think so many things just divide us in this world. But I think a greater spirituality, in whatever form that takes, is what the world needs. You look around at the moment, and it's in a pretty poor state in many ways, in many countries. And I'm not just talking about Ukraine. There are all kinds of things going on around the world. And really, I think the world needs a greater spirituality. So when I wrote Revelation, it embodies all my lifetime's experiences and spiritual philosophy, but it's framed within this fast-paced thriller about what would happen if life after death could be proved scientifically. Because if something as big as that were to happen, just how would the world react? And so it poses a lot of what I think are very intriguing and exciting questions. That's it in a nutshell, Phil.
Yeah. Now, I know a lot of people, like me, I'm Wiccan and everything like that, but I try to incorporate every religion, talk about it, simplify it the best that I can.
Yeah.
Like I don't like even though I do have abilities to clairvoyant abilities, audio, if I can talk, clairaudience, clairsentient, and stuff like that. I tend to use I don't tend to use the word psychic. I tend to use the word hyper empath. Just because I do have all those abilities, and I've had those abilities since I was 5 years old.
Yeah, exactly the same. And I think that's very important, because otherwise these labels just divide us and can cause so many problems, whereas actually that kind of ability to see and hear and feel and understand the presence of spirits is indeed open to everybody. Some people pick it up quicker than others because they may be more sensitive, or things happen to them, like indeed the story you mentioned at the top of the show, Jamie. There are so many millions and millions of stories around the world of people who've had similar kind of experiences. But we're all so busy in our everyday lives that few people really stop and think about these things. So whilst Revelation is indeed a thriller as a novel, within it, I think people will find a lot of things that will resonate with them about, I don't always thought that, or gosh, yes, I realise that now, or something, because it is packed with a lot of spiritual philosophy and scientific fact, religious thought, political thought, you name it, but all wrapped up in this exciting tale. So in many ways, I won't say it's unique, because there may be other things out there, but it's certainly very different. And I think very few people have written a novel of this sort from the angle of being a spiritual medium, having studied and gained a degree in philosophy, which is a very skeptical, analytical thought pattern, and taking such an interest in the dichotomies between religion and science, which plague the world today, because they seem to be fighting each other at times and coming at things from a different angle. Whereas if we work together, and as you rightly say, Phil, let's respect everybody's faith. Let's respect each other. Let's understand we're all part of the universal energy. We're all one and the same, and let's leave all those divisions aside and try and strive for a greater understanding amongst each other. And I think that comes through a greater spirituality. That's my own personal view.
Yeah. Now, of course, I'm talking about people that there's still people out there that have problems. I've had people that say that because I practice witchcraft, because I'm Wiccan, that I'm a devil worshiper. And it's like, no, that's not the case. If you took time to learn about my religion and everything like that, or have a discussion with me, I'd be happy to tell you and everything like that. And we can have that open discussion. But of course, there are people that just don't want to hear that. They're the people that I like to call the holy rollers of Bible thumpers, and
you get them.
So I kind of started turning it back on. I haven't had this in a while, but I kind of turned it back on them and use the Bible and tell them, well, if he without sin cast the first stone, or does the Bible not say, judge not lest you be judged yourself? and they kind of shut up. So,
but you'll always get that. You'll always get that. But indeed, it's a funny thing, because actually, you do get it sometimes. People say, "Well, you're dabbling with things you shouldn't," and all the rest of it. There's no shouldn't about it. That's just dogmatic thought that has made people think that way. If one was to read the New Testaments in the way they were being written about the life of Jesus, he himself said, you can all come to God in your own way. You can all just open yourself up to speaking to God. You don't necessarily need to go to the temples or whatever. He indeed preached a wonderful spirituality. He was undoubtedly, I believe, a very great man. And indeed, all the prophets have done the same. They've wanted people to have that relationship with the higher spirit or God or whatever you want to call it. And I think it's a great shame when people come at it from a very closed angle and only want you to believe something from their particular perspective. I'm always saying we don't know all the answers. We're still at the very edge of discovering so much, not just about our own spirituality, but about the world and the universe and everything that surrounds us. Our knowledge is still so young. And to come at things that there is only one way of looking at things, I think is very limited. And I try to say to people, well, open your mind. Stuff that's happened and is happening is extraordinary. I take an interest in what's happening in science as well, because I think it's very relevant to us. We've now discovering more and more that everything is made up of energy. And as Einstein said, energy cannot be destroyed. And this brings us into the realms of spirit existence, because, of course, spirit is energy. We are all energy. We've come from spirit. We are spirit. We will return to spirit. And it is that energy which binds us all, and it's energy which makes up the entire universe. And the more we're finding out about it, the more we're discovering, that's why I wrote the book Revelation, because I thought, well, hang on a minute. If spirit exist as they do on a very high energetic frequency, what would happen if somebody could develop a device of some sort that could actually pick up that very high vibrational frequency? People have tried. People have gone out with cameras, with recording devices and everything, but they haven't actually got anything yet which can do that. But if it did happen, wow, that would be absolutely amazing and would be seismic for the world.
Yeah, and of course there's a lot of technology coming out. I mean, it's only a matter of time probably until we get something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I try to explain different things, like talking about different religions and stuff like that, is that whereas I believe in light entities and dark entities, well, if you're a Christian, that can be construed as angels and demons. It's just a matter of wording.
Yeah, exactly.
Or higher plane of existence, lower plane of existence, hell and heaven. I mean, it's just all a matter of words and everything like that.
That's absolutely right. And I think it's just a different perspective on how you come to look at the world. But what I guess I tried to do in Revelation is pose that question as, if that did happen, I think a lot of people would be wonderfully uplifted by it. But actually, what happens in Revelation is that there are those in power who, from a political, religious, or whatever perspective, see Revelation as a threat to their status quo and decide that the device and the people who've invented it must be destroyed. And that's what sets off this fast-paced chase and thrilling chain of events that ultimately leads to a wonderfully life-affirming conclusion. But it does pose the question, what would actually happen? People do have different perspectives, and rightly so. I don't think there is one way of looking at the world. But what one person thinks is wonderful, somebody else might think is a threat. And that's fine. I accept that. I just wish we could do it in a peaceful and loving and compassionate and tolerant way, and just say, okay, I respect your view. I have my own view, but I respect yours. Let's live together with it, and all of us keep striving for greater truths.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, that's the way I see it, is if we sit down and have discussions, we can learn, even if we disagree with each other, we can always find some common ground and everything like that and agree on something.
Absolutely.
Because, like I said, I do have friends that are Christians, and when they lived in the apartments where I'm at, they would come over to talk to me and everything like that. They would talk about their faith. I would talk about my faith because they loved hearing about it and everything like that.
Yeah. And like you, Phil, I've got friends in, virtually every religion. I mean, I do quite a bit of work with charities as well, which are all from all kinds of denominations and everything. And for me, it's not the label you wear, it's the person, it's the human being. What is the spirit within that person? If you are loving and giving and tolerant and understanding, compassionate, that's what I look at. I'm not worried about what label you wear. If you want to have a particular label, a particular faith or whatever, I just say, well, that's good for you. I respect it. If you don't, there are people who, atheists, agnostics, whatever. I just say to them too, well, good for you. That's the way you look at the world. I'm not going to dictate to you or try to preach to you to do this or do that. Everybody will come to it in their own different way. We're all individual spiritual beings. But what I would love one day is the world to rediscover so much of the spirituality that we lost from the ancients, ancient cultures that really understood that connection with the Great Spirit. You look at the Native Americans, for example, who believe that the Great Spirit is within everything, within the land, within the rocks, within the water, and lived very close to the spiritual dimension, and would consult with the spirits for guidance and all the rest. And there are many examples of that kind of spirituality within ancient cultures, which we've kind of lost over the centuries. And I find that very sad. I think we have to reclaim a lot of that because the world desperately needs it.
Yeah, and you talk about ancient religions and stuff like that, and like the Native Americans, like Wicca derives from the ancient Celtic druids, pagans, and everything like that. So, and you, being over there, you know about them, that they were big on nature and everything like that, celebrating the harvest and everything else.
Yeah, you see it all in nature. Nature is our greatest educator. But again, we're not living close to nature. In fact, at the moment, we're destroying much of it. And if we don't stop that, we're going to destroy ourselves. And I don't think many people have woken up enough to what that threat is, the environmental threat, and what we're doing to the planet, to the animals, to our whole ecostructure is really far more worrying than a lot of what man is doing to man at the moment.
And of course, like me, right now I live in the city, but I'd rather be out in the country enjoying the nature, enjoying the sounds of the country, the peace and quiet, the beautiful sights that you can see out in the country that you can't get from the city. I mean, you got good things in the city, but that's for like if you want to go out and party or enjoy food or whatever, or something like that. But if you really want to get back to nature, you got to go out in the country. You got to go to like national parks and places of nature.
Yeah, exactly that. And when you are surrounded by nature, you can't but feel close to a higher, a kind of, well, I feel close to the Great Spirit, for want of a better expression, but just closer to something much higher. When you think about it, our cities, especially in the expression in which they are now, are so young. You're talking a couple of 100 years or something, which is nothing. We've created this monster of a life now, which of course, is a necessity, but at the same time, we've lost so much else in the process.
Yeah. Now, see, I grew up in Southern California, so I mean, we pretty much from Los Angeles all the way out to the desert is pretty much one big city.
Yeah.
Even though there's different cities. And it's like there's really nothing except for small little parks usually there, in like the bigger cities. I mean, New York, I mean, you got Central Park, but the rest is pretty much built up cities. It's like,
of course, and will continue to be so, because that's the structure of our world, which is fine. That's the way we live. We all make a living doing. I don't make a living doing this. I'm an advertising copywriter. That's how I make my living. I actually work from home, but it's a very busy profession, which I enjoy. But that's what we all have to do. Everybody has to go out to work or do work to earn a living, look after themselves, their families, etc. That's the structure that we've built for ourselves, and so I guess we kind of have to live with it. We can't all suddenly up sticks and go out and live in the country. So we got to make the best of it, and I think finding ways to do that. Again, I come back to spirituality, because I think if you have a spiritual perspective on life, you do tend to think more in terms of how can we best live together, how can we look after each other, how can we develop a political, eco and economic structure that looks after everyone and takes note of those less fortunate in society, etc. It's a massive thing, but sadly, so few people are actually lifting their eyes from whatever they're doing and thinking about it.
Yeah, and of course, that kind of brings me to one thing that I've mentioned many times on my show and everything like that, and I think it would be helpful in that whole thing, it waking people up, is being able to see and communicate with spirits and opening that third eye. And the way I coined the term, I want to say about 10 years ago or so, maybe longer, called the Santa Claus effect. And,
yeah.
And for anybody that's got small children, have them tune away. I don't want to destroy their reality. I always have to put that disclaimer out there. But anyways, the way I describe it is that when we're young, we're told Santa Claus is real. As we grow older, we're told he's not real. Well, same thing with the spirit world. When we're young, our minds are not corrupted by the everyday world, and we can see the spirit world. We can see spirits and everything like that. And it's not corrupted until somebody comes along and says, well, that's just your imagination. It's not real. Stuff like that. And that ability gets pushed from that third eye, the conscious mind, all the way down into the deepest part of the subconscious, where it's locked away. And a lot of people don't know how to reopen that ability, or don't want to.
Yeah, that's very, very true. There are countless examples, and I've known children. It happened with both mine, actually. They do see and hear things at a young age perfectly naturally. And then just the busyness of modern life and everything else, and school, and whether you're following a particular religion or whatever, start to get in the way, as it were, and push those things to the back. I think it's a great shame, but it does happen.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I mean, like my parents, luckily, they reinforced that ability because my mom was able to see spirits. So, I mean, she wasn't as strong as my abilities are now, but she did be able to see them and was like, don't be afraid of it. It's natural and everything like that. And so she reinforced those abilities and allowed me to continue to strengthen my abilities.
That's lovely. That's very interesting, Phil, because my mum was the same. She's sadly passed now, but she could see and hear spirits. And indeed, the first spirit that I heard in the house we lived in, she actually saw it. That it was a young girl, a teenager who'd passed in that house, had been a seamstress, and she used to see and hear the most extraordinary things throughout her life, and again just took it as perfectly natural. But I always say to people, unless you have those experiences for yourself, it's very difficult. I never try and make people believe it or say, well, just because I've had those experiences, you should believe it too. I'm not like that at all. I'm so against dogmatic approaches to pushing particular agendas at people. And I often say to people, it's good to be skeptical.
Yeah, and
it's good to question.
Yeah, I always say that skepticism is healthy in the paranormal, because if we didn't have that, then everything we saw would be considered paranormal. And not all the time it's not paranormal. Like the noise in the wall, it could be like people hear knocking. Well, that doesn't mean that the spirit's knocking on the wall. It could be an animal in the wall. It could be the lights banging around. You got to look at it from a skeptical side. But at the same time, you don't want to be completely skeptical. James Randi comes to mind, where I swear if he saw a Bigfoot or a spirit right in front of him, he'd be like, oh, it's a trick of light. It's somebody in costume. I swear that would be his words.
Yeah, sure. I think all one can ask is that people are open-minded, because I think if you are open-minded, then that's great. But it's one of the reasons, Phil, that I went on to get a degree in philosophy and study it, because I was having all these experiences, and to me, it was perfectly natural that I could see and hear spirits by the time I went to university to do philosophy. But the reason I chose to do that is because it is a skeptical, analytical, ruthless forensic study of the nature of existence and everything. Because I really wanted to understand what is going on. Why are there different dimensions to this life that a lot of people don't seem to want to consider? And the empirical approach to philosophy, where you construct your world from the five senses, what we can see, hear, feel, taste, touch, etc. That's how we construct our physical world. And yet, when we look at the animal kingdom, we see so many examples. Indeed, I've put a lot of this into my book, Revelation. We see so many examples of where animals have so much heightened senses than ours. Dogs have a sense of smell, which I gather is something like 1,000 times greater than ours. We can't even begin to imagine what that would be like. We don't really understand a lot about how bats can fly around in their thousands in dark caves and not bump into each other because of their incredibly advanced sonar. How whales can navigate around the globe and always return to the same bay every year. We have this all around us, and yet when people are presented with things that are outside their five senses, they start talking about the supernatural, or that things are paranormal or whatever. And I often say to people, actually, as again going back to the Native Americans, there's no such thing as the supernatural in that sense. It's just that we don't necessarily understand natural law, and we've lost a lot of that closeness to nature, where we actually say, learn from nature, learn from the animals, learn from how they perceive the world. There are many, many more ways of seeing and interacting with the world than our limited human senses.
Yeah,
and so. Yeah, sorry, Phil. Yeah,
I was going to say, growing up in Southern California, I mean, living in earthquake country, if you watch an animal, you know something's coming when they start running.
Oh, absolutely. And anybody who has a dog or cat at home will probably have many examples of that, where they pick things up. And there are countless stories of how dogs and cats have picked up spirit presence in a house or in a room. Their hackles rise. They don't know what's happening because they know it's slightly out of the ordinary, but they're not exactly sure what's going on. Many people, even the most skeptical people, will have stories like that, but then they tend to get shelved. People don't tend to want to delve into them, which is fine if that's where you're coming from. That's it's not for me to tell you that you should look into them or not, but it does make you realize that actually there is a lot more to life than meets the eye.
All right, well, we're at the commercial break, but we'll be right back with my guest, Nick Pease, as we talk about life after death in his book, Revelation. We'll be right back after the short commercial break.
Could I believe in what my eyes cannot see? Or has the antidote to brokenness evaded me? Could I believe in what my ears have not heard? Or will the suffering that surrounds me have the final word? Even on the darkest nights, I know the sun will rise. I will trust the promise I cannot see with my eyes. Even when the clouds surround, I know the sun still shines.
Do you have a talk radio, Facebook Live, or YouTube show and would like guests for your show but don't know where to go to get them? Well, go to radioguestlist.com and sign up today. They have all different experts in different fields, and you can find the ones that are just right for your show. That's radioguestlist.com. Sign up today. It's free.
To advertise on Talk in the Night, send an email to talkinthe.night@outlook.com. Talk in the Night has plans to fit your budget. Get your product or business heard around the world by the Talk in the Night listening audience. Plans include 30-second spots and banner ads on the show's website and mentioned on the social media sites. So get your product or business heard around the world today. Shop the Talk in the Night merch store today and pick up one of the many products with 9 different designs to choose from. The store has men's and women's apparel, drinkware, houseware, and accessories. Pick up a t-shirt, coffee mug, or anything else on there and support the show today. Go to talkinthe.night.com to find a link to the merch store.
Moon around the ocean, heaven seems so far. Is it my reflection? Here I am, stars in the sky.
And now, back to Talk in the Night with your host, Paranormal Phil.
Okay, and we are back with my guest, Nick Pease, as we talk about life after death and his book, Revelation. So I want to ask, because you mentioned it in the first half hour of the show, about being able to see spirits. And I know, like me, I had my first experience when I was 5 years old. It was a little boy playing with a ball on top of the refrigerator in my parents' house, and I was like, being a kid, I was like, I want to play. I wasn't scared or anything like that. And of course, it was after midnight, and I was out there getting a drink. But this was in the 70s and early 70s, so parents really didn't bother with kids at that time of age, but that era. But I wanted to see, when did you first learn that you could see spirits?
Well, seeing spirits didn't come till I was in my early teens. I was hearing them much earlier. As I think I mentioned, my first experience came when I was 5 or 6, and that actually did frighten me because I wasn't sure what was happening. It was the spirit of a girl in her teens who used to walk down from the top floor and along the corridor and come and stand by my bed. But of course, I never saw her because by then I'd buried myself under the bedclothes and was absolutely terrified because I knew that something strange was happening. It was only later with my mum, who could see her as well, that I began to totally accept it and realize that there was more to life than the everyday. But in my teens, I started to, as I was sort of developing, I suppose, without realizing it, because it was too young for me to actually be developing as a spiritual medium as such. But just my natural sensitive abilities, I suppose, were making me see spirit beings. And I remember the first time I saw an elderly man who'd passed, and it was just so perfect. I could see it now in my mind's eye that it was just so natural. A beautiful smile on his face. And even today, when I see spirits, and like you now, Phil, it's so, you just accept it so much that I welcome it, and it's so beautiful. And when I wake up sometimes in the night, and there may be a spirit being in the room with me, it's just so beautiful. I had one not that long ago of a lady I knew, beautiful lady. She was a musician. She passed a few years ago. And I woke up one morning, and I was awake, and I was lying there thinking of nothing particular. And then I noticed her just sitting at the edge of my bed. And she looked a bit younger to when she actually passed over. And it was just so beautiful. And I actually reached my hand out to touch her. And at that point, she disappeared, just like that. But I always say to people, well, I can tell you these things, and to me they're as real as 2 + 2 = 4, more real. But I don't expect you to believe them, because you don't have that experience necessarily for yourself. So you'll have to have that experience one day, and I hope you do, everybody, that will make you realize that life after death is just completely natural. There's nothing wrong in having contact with those in spirit. It's a very natural part of our lives. They're round and about us right now. There are many dimensions to the spirit world. It's a huge, huge subject for anybody who wants to actually go in and study it. It's not just us here and them there. There are many dimensions to the spirit world. And the more you delve and try and learn, the more you realize that you know nothing. And actually there's so much more to learn. So, but as you all know yourself, Phil, because you've had those experiences, it is beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. But they come in all different shapes and forms. Many of them look just like you and me, but there are spirit entities which come in very different shapes and forms. And those that I didn't begin to see until I'd really started to develop as a spiritual medium, so in my 20s, because those, I won't say they can be unsettling, but because they are very different, they don't necessarily look as human as you and I. They're not bad spirits or anything like that, but they're just different. You have to be ready for that. And once you've accepted that they do come in these different forms, it's fine. A lot of spirit beings that you'll see who are maybe relatives or friends, or like the musician friend in my case, will look very much like they did in this lifetime, except they're somehow more totally at peace, totally full of love. They always come with love and understanding. They never come with a view to judging us. They're just completely accepting of who we are. And for me, it's just beautiful and adds so much to one's earthly life.
Yeah, and of course there's the darker side of things, which I've dealt with plenty of times. I mean, I've been called into locations of the cleansed homes of the darker entities and stuff like that. Just because that's one of my abilities. But when I go into a location, I make sure, even if it is that light entity, and a past loved one, I still go into a location with that white light surrounding me, with the no fear and everything like that, because that doorway is open, and that means that not if they can come through, something else can come through. Like you mentioned, things that are not looking human, like elementals.
Yeah,
And,
you get that.
Have you had any experiences with elementals?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And you have to always protect yourself. And that's why anybody who does want to start seeking contact with the spirit world, if they did, I always counsel to be very careful about it. There are a lot of people out there who are indeed dabbling in it and not really understanding that you do have to approach it with respect. And there are darker energies out there. I don't get worried about that, because I know that with the right protection, you can protect yourself from them. And they won't harm you as such, but there can be, and there are many instances of where people have lived with poltergeists or whatever and had dark energy in the house, where you do have to be careful and do have to surround yourself with light and ask for protection and know how to look after yourself. It's one of the reasons I don't myself go into these haunted houses late at night. There's one very near where I live where people do tend to go and do it for a dare. They spend the night there, and it's meant to be one of the most haunted houses in the United Kingdom, and that's saying something, because we've certainly got a number over here. But they do that. I don't, because I know very well that there is the potential there for darker entities to try and approach you. As I say, they won't hurt you necessarily, but particularly if you're protected. But they are there, and you just have to note that and treat it with caution. That's why I always treat the spirit world with the greatest of respect. I don't approach this as a kind of game or anything to do with as I say, I don't make a living out of it or anything like that. Yeah. It's very much with respect and a striving for greater knowledge. That's what it is to me.
Yeah, and of course there are people out there that will go out to provoke the spirits, to kind of be like call them out, like show yourself and stuff like that, real angrily. Yep. And it's, I mean, yeah. Why? I mean, if they want to show themselves, they will. You don't need to do it. I mean, Zach Baggins from Ghost Adventures is a good example of that. I mean, he drags along a lot of demons with him, or darker entities with him. And he don't understand what he's doing is dragging his life through the mud.
Absolutely, and you do need to be careful. But the other side of the coin is that the generally speaking, those in spirit who do wish to communicate with us, they come with beautiful love and understanding, and it's a beautiful thing. But as I said, I think earlier in the show, unless you have that experience for yourself, it's very hard perhaps to accept it at face value. And I encourage that. I say to people, well, don't, be skeptical, do ask questions. Don't just accept what you're told. Strive for your own knowledge, or don't strive for it. If you don't want to touch it, you're not interested in it, that's fine. Why should you? It's entirely up to you. We're all individual. We all have our own views on life and how we want to live our lives. Some people want to live their lives thinking we're born, we live, we die, and that's it. And for them, that's fine. If that's how they want to live their lives, I'm not going to be the one who is going to try and preach to them to do it differently. That's I accept that and will respect it. I think it's a shame, because you're closing off so much of what there is out there for you, and spirituality has added so much to my life that I couldn't possibly be without it now.
Yeah, and of course, I don't want to spend too much time on this, because I do want to talk about your book and everything like that.
Yeah.
But, what have you learned so far with all the with your abilities, with reading about it and studying it? What have you learned so far about life after death?
Well, for me, it's an absolute reality. I couldn't escape it because obviously being able to hear them and later see them, for me, it's just a fact of life. But what I've learned, and I've obviously through studying philosophy, taking an interest in religion, science, and everything else, is that we are just at the forefront of discovering so much more about the nature of existence. As I mentioned earlier about everything being energy, we're only just beginning to discover what that really means in terms of what's out there in the universe. And I think it gives us a greater perspective on our own lives. I often cite the case of Galileo, who, after all, it's less than 500 years ago when he adopted the Copernican system. And actually went out and said, hey, guys, everything isn't actually going around the Earth. We're not the be-all and end-all of everything. We're part of something much bigger. Of course, he was made to recant it initially by the threat of going before the Holy Inquisition. But we now know, and that knowledge is so new, 500 years is nothing. It's less than 500 years when that happened. And we're discovering so much more and more and more. And at the beginning of the 20th century, Max Planck, with everything that he brought into the realm of physics and everything, and what we learned, and when they split the atom and realized that everything was made up of subatomic structures, etc., were so new into what the nature of existence is. And hand in glove with that comes, we're so new to really picking up again on our spirituality and realizing that it is our birthright and that we are spirit beings and we will return to spirit. And surely for me, that gives a different perspective on this life. And I guess the question I pose in Revelation is, if something like this happened, that somebody could 100% prove life after death as a scientific fact, how would that make people react in their everyday lives? Would it make you live life in a different way? For me, and probably for you, Phil, I don't know, but you'll tell me in a minute, no doubt. When I pursued the spiritual path, it did make me think, you know what? And I'm by no means perfect. My goodness, I'm not. But it did make me think, well, really, this life, I need to do the best I can. I need to do whatever I can to look after the planet, the animals, look after people in whatever ways. And I've tried to do that through all kinds of endeavors. As I say, I'm no saint, but I do my bit because I have that kind of spiritual perspective on life. And I think if that were to pervade our world in a greater way, it would be so much a better place. So what I'm learning is that we're actually still so new to a lot of this knowledge, and I hope that science and religion and spirituality and philosophy can all go hand in glove together and really expand the frontiers of our knowledge and our understanding of what existence is all about, because I really do believe a better world is possible.
Yeah, and of course, there's a lot out there that we don't understand. Like me, I when I got into the more studying it and learning about it as I grow older, I mean, heck, when I was 15 years old, my parents would take us up to Calgary, Alberta, Canada for the Stampede. And
I've been to Calgary,
most kids at that age would want a toy. Me, I wanted a book on Bigfoot. So, I mean, it just fascinated me. And even though I've been out of the field for probably about 6 years, but, I mean, I still consider, still kind of somewhat in it, the paranormal field. And this year is 30 years that I've been in the field.
Yep. Yeah.
And there's always something to learn to new, but new to learn, if I can talk. But anyways, I believe that I got into learning about past lives, learning about my life before this one and so forth.
Yep.
And our bodies are just the vessel that's carrying our soul and everything like that. And it's gonna, as you said, a lot of people believe once we're done on this earth, that's it. But there's people like the Buddhists and everything like that believe in reincarnation and everything like that. And yes, this could be the end, or it could be just the beginning of a start of a new one after this. We don't know all the answers, like you mentioned. We don't know everything. So, I mean, we know more about space than we do like the oceans. And if we would take time to learn about that stuff, we probably could find out a lot.
Absolutely, Phil. And you touch on huge subjects there, because I think if we approach this with greater humility, we do understand, and we're able to say, look, we don't know everything. We really don't. We're only at the start of it. And I think it's very difficult where some people will point to one particular train of thought and say, no, this is the truth. This is the way you have to act and believe. To actually say to people that as we stand today, and I see humankind still as pretty primitive, and to try and pretend that there is one way of looking at the world and one truth, I think is absolutely nuts, because we're still discovering so much more. And you touch on subjects there which just show how huge the whole area of spirituality is, because reincarnation, past lives, these things are massive. And I've had direct experience of various of these things, and channeling, and the where you see somebody actually channeling a spirit being. They're absolutely incredible and fascinating areas, but each one is huge. So it's a striving for greater knowledge in all these areas, and I shall do it to my dying breath. I shall still be looking for greater knowledge and understanding. I won't get there, but you don't. But I'll go on to whatever I go on to, in terms of back into the spirit world. But it totally fascinates me. I find it amazing.
Yeah, of course, like me, a lot of people like to focus on one thing to learn and be good at that. Whereas me, I like to learn a lot of different things. I delve into not only the spirit world, but I delve into ufology, cryptozoology, technology, all this political conspiracies, stuff like that. I want to learn a little bit of everything than wanting all of one thing. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's, for me, and those in spirit will often tell us that life is a school, and that makes sense of things for me, that we come here to learn lessons which we will take back with us into the spirit world. It puts our lives into perspective, and that therefore I believe a lot of this life is learning. I don't mean that in the scholastic sense. I mean literally just learning from life, observing, learning from people, learning from what we do in our lives, etc. Just learning, realizing that our spirit is growing all the time, and taking back those experiences into the spirit world for what your soul will go on to do thereafter.
Yeah. Now, we're coming up on the break here in about 7 minutes, but in your bio, you mentioned about the age-old question, basically, what if we could really prove 100% life after death with scientific fact? What do you think we would discover if we could actually do that?
Well, that's what the book Revelation is actually all about, because to you and I, Phil, we would rejoice and we'd say, wow, fantastic, this is what we've always known, but now we can prove it scientifically. But what happens in the book is when these two friends who are scientists make the discovery quite by accident, and they're working for the CIA at the time, And one of them takes it to who was his boss in the CIA, who has gone on to become the White House chief of staff, so in a very senior position, and takes the discovery to him because he thinks it can only be handled at the very highest level, because otherwise, if he goes to the media, it might get out of hand and treated in a sensationalized way, etc. Thinking that all will be well and he'll be, rejoiced, etc. Only to find that there are those in power who see Revelation as a direct threat to their political or religious agendas, and they'll do anything to destroy it and the creator. So that's essentially the story, and so it does pose questions. Now, to you and I, Phil, we would welcome it. We would think fantastic. We would think there's the proof for everybody. Those who either are religious, non-religious, they will point to their books and say, well, we've already got the proof in there, but here it is scientifically as well to back you up. This gives you credence as well. But actually, don't let's fool ourselves. A lot of people wouldn't like it. A lot of people would object to it and find it a threat or be worried by it or whatever. The more you live, the more experience you have, the older you get, you realize there are so many different ways of looking at the world. What may seem like right or wrong to you or I will be completely different to somebody else. And that's fine. I totally accept that. But it is the way of the world. I'm sorry to bring in Ukraine as well, but there's an absolute expression of it. There are trains of thought that say, do you want the communist system to rule you? Do you want the capitalist system to rule you? Do you want whatever system it is, whatever political system it is? And people will have different beliefs of what is the best for the world, whether it's right or wrong. And the thing that always amazes me, and I love it about spirit beings, is they never come to tell you what's right or wrong. They never, about your own lives as well, they never say you're doing right, you're doing wrong. They never judge you. And I think that's a wonderful thing, that they let you live your life and they let you live it with love and understanding. These are such huge subjects, but I think if life after death was proved scientifically, it would be incredible for the world. It really would, because I think for the great majority of people, it would put their own lives in perspective, and they'd say, right, if I live on, then surely that has an influence and puts a perspective on the life I'm leading now. Does that not have some kind of moral code within it? Does it make me want to live a better life because I'm going to take that with me when I pass on? So I think it would be brilliant, but I fully accept there will be people who would find it threatening.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's people in the government that would find something threatening about it. I mean, look at ufology. I mean, just earlier this year, they came out with, under the Freedom of Information Act, that Roswell was actually a crashed UFO. But before that, from 1947 till earlier this year, it was always considered a weather balloon, swamp gas, something else. But I don't think we're ever going to get the full truth from them and everything like that. I mean, they're just giving us little breadcrumbs, so we'll shut up. But
well, that's exactly what happens in Revelation in relation to the device that proves life after death. There are those who want to not just hush it up, but actually destroy it for their own agendas. And the story is how one of the scientists in particular, with his love interest, can escape and get it out into the public domain. And they go through a thrilling roller coaster of events as they try to evade people who are on their tail, trying to destroy them. But ultimately, it leads towards what I think is a beautifully life-affirming conclusion. But along the way, there's all kinds of things in the book that I hope will make people think and inspire them and give them hope and make them realize that there really is more out there. They are loved. There's a greater perspective to life, and those who we've lost, and all of us will have lost people along the way, along our lives, live on. and it's very heartening. That doesn't mean we don't grieve, of course we do, but it's beautiful to know that those that we have loved live on in another dimension.
All right, well, we're at the commercial break here at the top of the hour, but we'll be right back after the short commercial break with my guest, Nick Pease, as we talk about Life After Death, his book, Revelation, and we'll get into phone calls and questions after the commercial break. We'll be right back. The weather is getting warmer and people are out and about. Well, if you love ghost hunting, now is the time to pick up some new gear. GhostStop.com has a wide variety of equipment to choose from, and one of those items is Blue Buddy. He's back. The talking bear every investigator wants on their team. Click on the Ghost Stop banner ad at the top of the show's website and pick up your Blue Buddy today. Go to spring.com and sign up to create your own design or choose from a design from one of the many creators on there. Spring has ways to integrate your store on social media, custom stores, and they have digital and physical products. While you're there, check out the Talk in the Night merch store. To get started with Spring today, click on the banner ad on the Talk in the Night website. Go to the show's website, click on the links for each of my guests, and purchase a book or other product that they may be promoting. Without them, there would be no Talk in the Night. Whether you're interested in the paranormal, conspiracy, technology, health, relationships, or any other topic the show covers, my guests have something for you. Check it out today on talkingthenight.com.
I can be sad with you. Just take my hand and fly up through the dreams where the skies are so clear. With you, I wanna stay with you. With you, I love the way that you love me today. Let's run up through the fields where the sun shines and heals.
To call into the show, Skype Talk in the Night or by phone at 817-717-1280. Now back to Talk in the Night with your host, Paranormal Phil.
Okay, and we are back with my guest, Nick Pease, as we talk about Life After Death, his book, Revelation. And of course, the phone lines are open. You can call into the show using the Skype name Talk in the Night or by phone at 817-717-1280 or go over to Spreaker.com, sign up for a free account. It don't cost a dime. You don't have to record anything. And you can chat with me and other people in the chat. We got people in there and everything. Discuss the show, ask questions. And I do have questions for you as well from the listening audience. So, the first question, which was asked in the first hour, and people know, this person knows, I don't ask questions until the second hour. But anyways, I do welcome the questions early too, because, I mean, it gives me a chance to get a bunch of questions too. But anyways, it says, do you think that being psychic or open to the spirit world makes it easier for us to enter the afterlife once we pass?
What a great question. I don't think it makes it any different to anybody else, other than in one great respect. The more aware you are that you are passing into the spirit world, yes, in that sense, it makes it easier. You'll be ready for what happens. You'll be more accepting of it. So in that sense, it is. But in terms of, does it make it different in terms of you are different to other people? No, everybody is a beautiful spiritual individual. Everybody will return to the spiritual dimension. But you do touch on a big subject there, because of course that's why a number of spirit beings are still clinging to the earthly dimension. That's why we get sightings of so-called ghosts, etc. Some people find it very hard to pass over if they've had very particular, very strong dogmatic religious beliefs or whatever it might be, or maybe they've lived pretty bad lives, as we would call them, bad lives. Spirit don't judge in that sense, but on this earth plane, they still cling to the earth plane when they pass over. So you don't just, I mean, although passing over has often been likened to walking into another room, it can vary for different people. Some people accept it readily. Yes, if you are psychic or open to spirit, you will accept walking into the light in a easier way, whereas other people will find it unnerving perhaps, or just cling to the earthly life that they've had. It's different for everybody in some respects, and I know this sounds a bit of a contradiction, but in other ways, it's exactly the same. We will all go through that. We will all go through that portal into the other dimension. If you have lived this life with a more spiritual perspective, you will certainly be more open to it and ready for it. But that's not to say that somebody who hasn't can readily step into that a new life in exactly the same way. Yeah, but you're touching on a big subject, so yeah. I could talk for that for hours.
Yeah. No, like me, I believe, as I mentioned earlier, talking about past lives and everything like that, I've lived quite many of them. And I believe after this one, and I could be wrong, but I believe after this one, I'm pretty much going to be one of those guiding spirits that most people like you and me turn to for... Yep. Giving answers and helping people and stuff like that. So I believe that's where I'm going to be after this one. I think I've learned all that I can in this one and all the past ones. But I do want to break up the questions between the listeners and the questions I do have for you. And I do want to ask about the book. Why the title? Was it based on like maybe real events or real projects that governments have or anything like that, or is it just something fictional?
The title just came to me, and because of inevitably what the device was trying to do was to reveal things. It didn't actually set out, the CIA project that the scientists were working on was actually to reveal the energetic structure of everything, so that things like improvised explosive devices and landmines could be identified in combat theatre. So it had a very, very positive purpose. And that's why it was called Revelation as the code name for the project. But of course, that's what it's about as well. It is a revelation. And when it proves life after death, the whole thing is a revelation. But it wasn't just the title. The whole thing came to me. I wrote the kernel of the book literally in a week. I couldn't write fast enough. I didn't sit at a computer. I had a notepad with me, and I was being spirit inspired at the time. I couldn't write fast enough to get the kernel of the story down. So that was done in a week. Of course, after that, I edited it, added characters and all the rest of it, and that takes some time. But essentially, spirit inspiration, as you know, Phil, when it comes through, you just have to go with it because you know you're being given it for a purpose. But yeah, the title wasn't relating to anything that I'd seen or heard about in the outside world. It just very much came from spirit inspiration.
Okay, that's why I wanted to check, because there are, I'm pretty sure there's certain projects out there, like last night we talked about astral travel and everything like that, and talked about the Stargate program and stuff like that. And I mean, they got this technology, and I'm sure we'll never know all the details to it. But we do, like I said, get kernels every once in a while of these projects. But to know everything, unless we're in that inner circle, we'll never know.
Exactly that. And that's the intrigue that plays out when the main character in the book takes the discovery to his ex-CIA head, who's now White House Chief of Staff. And then what happens is the White House Chief of Staff consults with his inner cabal of people who become co-conspirators in the White House, who decide for political ends that it must be stopped. So these things do happen. I mean, we know this. Things come out eventually. Things come out of the woodwork, and we discover the intrigues that have gone on before, the things that have been hidden from us by governments, etc. It's crazy not to think that these things don't happen, because they do, and everybody has a different perspective on what is right or wrong to put into the public domain. And that's why when you asked earlier about what would happen if life after death could be scientifically proved 100%, I would readily understand that there will be people who will be against it for whatever reasons. I find that disappointing, but it could happen.
Yeah. Now, I want to welcome Nicole and Michelle to the chat real quick, because, like I said, I do interact with my listeners. I love seeing the discussion and everything. I love seeing the questions for my guests, even for me when I do my Friday night open line. So it's great to have people in the chat and asking these questions. Now, talking about the device in the book and talking about in real life now, we talked about could we actually prove it, and there are some like ITC apps and different spirit boxes and stuff like that that we can pick up spirits, but could something like that be kind of construed as like the device in Revelation?
Revelation is very, very different, because the book describes how it's constructed and how they go about doing it. But the whole thing about it is that when they actually make it work and they see and hear spirit beings, it is absolutely incontrovertible. They are 100% people that they know who've passed over, so they recognize them, they hear them, they tell them things that only they could know. So it's like being given the best evidence of life after death you could ever be given, but you're actually seeing and hearing people in reality. To my knowledge, there isn't any device yet in the world, unless governments are hiding it from us, that can do that with such assurance and such truth. And it's like when people go and see a genuine spiritual medium and they're able to give them fantastic evidence of life after death, things they can tell them, things that only they would know, which is wonderful. And Revelation takes that a step further, and the machine does it for them. But not only that, you actually see and hear people that you've known. Only then can you accept that it is 100% scientific fact. I think there are machines, I've heard of machines, devices, apps, call it what you will, that have tried and sort of get close to it and give you certain glimpses, but nothing yet, to my knowledge, has been as definite as that.
Now, in the book, there's 2 sittings set in Iraq and Washington, D.C. Now, I can kind of understand D.C. with political people in politics and high power, wanting to keep that hush-hush, but why Iraq?
That's where the device started, because when it was a CIA project, what they were trying to do was create a device that could energetically reveal improvised explosive devices and landmines in ways that heat devices, etc., can't yet do. So in other words, a device that could see everything, break everything down into its energetic structure, and could reveal these things so that they could be disabled, which is a wonderful thing to do. Now, in the book, the program actually fails in Iraq, and the scientists, when the Allied forces pulled out of Iraq, the scientists go back to Washington, D.C., where they're based. But two of them have squirreled away equipment and privately for their own ends continue to experiment. And that's when they, quite by accident, make the discovery that the device does indeed reveal energetic structures, but what it does is tune into a very high level of energetic frequency, which we know the spirit world exists on, and reveals spirit beings. So that's why it starts in Iraq and then moves to Washington. Okay,
that's a great thought on that. Now, getting back to questions from the chat, like I said, I'm switching between the two, unless we get a call. But anyways, what are your thoughts about, this is a question for Nicole, what are your thoughts about shadow people?
About what, sorry?
Shadow people.
I think there's good and bad, I have to say. I've seen both. Channeling does work. There's no question about it. It can, and I've seen it performed at the Spiritualist Association of Great Britain in London by brilliant, highly experienced mediums. And I actually sat in circle once when I saw this happen. And somebody not only channeled a spirit being, but I actually saw the spirit being come through their body energetically. We were in a very controlled environment with complete silence, and it was quite extraordinary. Unfortunately, there are those out there who claim to channel and aren't necessarily entirely genuine. I'm not going to doubt their motives. They may have a good heart and are trying to do it with a genuine will to help people, but on the other hand, there are those who will do it and believe they are channeling, and perhaps they aren't. You have to be very, very careful. I would always say to people, if you are looking either to channel yourself or to go and see somebody who can channel, do be careful. Do check out their credentials. Do try and find out what their motives are, what their experience is. To become a genuine person who can channel spirit beings on a regular basis does take a lot of application. It's generally only reached over a period of years. Yes, it can happen instantly, but generally speaking, to control it properly does take a lot of application.
Okay. Now, in the book, I think it's mentioned that the program Revelation failed, and how did they get it working again after leaving that secret project?
Well, the whole point of developing Revelation in combat theatre was that it could be easily portable and something that is no bigger than a car engine. In fact, smaller. So when they went back to Washington, D.C., the two scientists concerned, who'd been developing it, yes, it had failed in theatre, but they still wanted to develop it and see if they could create a device that could break down energetic structures and reveal things in that way, because it would be fascinating to all of us if that could happen. Now, one of them happens to already be thinking along the lines of, well, what if this could prove life after death? And you'd have to read the book to realize why he's thinking in that way. This is part of the intrigue of it, because he's beginning to think, well, hang on a minute, if we can break down energetic structures, could Revelation do this? So they start to work on it in their own time. up at one of the scientists. He's got a cabin up on a hill outside Washington, D.C. And it's whilst they're experimenting that, quite by accident, they then reveal spirit beings.
Okay. Now, getting back to the chat here, because I got a bunch of questions, so I'm trying to mix their questions with the questions that I have for you. Now, before I do actually get to the questions in the chat and everything like that, I do always like to ask my guest a devil's advocate question, because I love to throw people off their game. But what if what we're seeing is not actually real as far as the spirit world? What if it's just a simulation? What if it's not real and we do just pretty much end this life and get buried in the ground?
Nice question, Phil. I think once you have direct experience of spirit, it's incontrovertible. I mean, going back to the ancient cultures again, they say this is the dream world, the spirit world is the real world. It is that real. When I meditate, and when I come out of meditation, it's like a disappointment sometimes. I think, oh my goodness, that's so beautiful. That world is so incredible. And I think when you have that experience, it's the things that you see, hear, things that spirit can tell you that only you would know, that is just incontrovertible proof that there is life after death. You see them, and you're not, you don't necessarily are searching them out. They come to you. And for me, it's just as real as ABC. It's as simple as that. But I do accept that for a lot of people, they will need a lot of proof. And I always say to people, you don't just accept it. You will have to find the proof for yourself. I hope you do one day. But no, there's no way it's an illusion or anything like that. It is so real. It is so true. The love that comes through, the people that come through, people that may have. I've seen people who've passed over many, many years before. One of my grandfathers in particular is often with me. One of my grandmothers as well. Goodness, she's always with me in meditation. But I've seen her as well, and she's told me things and things that I didn't even know. And sometimes you only realize the truth of them at a later date. Things so it couldn't already be known, as it were. And that just shows you that, it's real. It's absolutely real. It's not illusory at all. The spirit world is a reality. And for me, as I say, it's as real as ABC, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, like I said, I just love asking those devil advocate questions because a while back I had a guest on that it was quite a few years back. Probably about 4 or 5 years ago, actually probably more than 5 years ago, that we were talking about the JFK assassination. He was stuck on the official story, and I would ask, well, what if there was another shooter and everything like that, and he was stuck on that narrative that he was not open to hearing other possibilities. So that's why I was like, okay, let me start asking devil advocate questions.
No, it's well, I always say, though, Phil, to people, I readily say it, don't believe a single word I say. Find your own truth. I think it's great that people ask questions. I welcome skepticism. It is the very reason I went and studied philosophy, to put everything under that forensic analysis of what exactly existence is made up of, and be highly skeptical of things and say, no, we must question these things, and we shouldn't just accept them at face value. I happen to know it's totally true because I have those experiences, and I've studied a great deal and continue to do so. But for anybody else, it is a search. It's a search for the truth.
All right, now here's another question for my listening audience: does he have any visions, and had they come true?
Yes, I'm not going to go into that It is such a big question, that, because that whole subject, I'm not a fortune teller, I'll say that straight out front. I don't believe that's the objective of being a spiritual medium anyway. But inevitably there are things that happen in life where you either know they're going to happen or things are going to happen, and it really raises a great many questions. I'm going to give you the short answer is yes, I have, but I'd rather not pursue that in much greater depth, because it takes you into a vast subject area which fascinates me, because it casts all sorts of questions about what is the nature of space and time. Is time circular, as indeed a lot of the ancient cultures believed? And then that touches in upon reincarnation. Are we going to come back necessarily in the future, or can you actually come back in what we call the past? These are huge subject areas, fascinating subjects, but yes, I have. That's the short answer.
I've talked to other guests and everything on the same subject, so they could probably go back and hear those shows. But I've also, like, every psychic, every person that has the ability has different strong points to them. Like, that's not your forte. You're not really suited for something like that. Whereas me, I've... just one example, Hurricane Katrina, before it even hit the east coast of Florida, I predicted the exact town that the eye of the storm hit before it even hit Florida.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Phil. And it is possible. There's no question. In answer to your caller's direct question, it is possible to have those. But you have to be careful, because, my goodness, there are so many people out there claiming this and that and the other, that they've foreseen something, and you do have to treat it with caution. Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Okay, we got time for one more question, and I'm going to go back to my questions about the book. And what was your biggest challenge with writing Revelation?
Nice question. It's actually more in the detail. I think I mentioned earlier, the kernel of the story came very quickly, but it's then actually, I'd say character development is one of the biggest challenges. It's making sure the characters are well-rounded and people can relate to them. You've got to have a very good eye for chronology, make sure all the events, and because Revelation is packed with all kinds of fast-paced events, there's action, there's love interest, there's humor, there's everything, making sure all that works. And then you've got the technical details of just from the publisher's point of view, making sure all the correct formats are used and all the rest of it. So there's quite a lot to writing a book. But then I'm an advertising copywriter, so writing is my trade. It's actually my debut novel, so it's the first actual book I've written. But I'm used to seeing my words in print in a different arena, in the advertising arena. So things come quite quickly to me in that sense. It's the detail that takes the time.
All right. Real quick, we got 3 minutes before the commercial break, so I want to get one last question in for the listening audience before we go to commercial break, and we'll get back to more of those questions, because like I said, they keep coming in, and it's like I don't have enough time. I only got 2 hours in the show. But do you have any funny experiences? Some of my spirits have fantastic sense of humors, and sometimes take nickels out of me. I know she is over in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that question because it's so true. And I mentioned that spirit come through with great love. They also often come through with humor. I think I mentioned one of my grandfathers who's in spirit, and he had a wicked sense of humor. And my goodness, yes, he's often pulled my leg. He did it I'm not going to give the specifics because it's very family oriented, but he did it once to me, which again was such proof of life after death, because he told me something. which actually was future based, which was interesting because that relates to an earlier question we had. And when it happened in such a funny way to do with family that only he would have known, and he told me about it. And then when it happened, I thought, oh my goodness, but it was so funny. So yes, they often come through with humor and they give you humorous things. It's not to trip you up or anything. It's just to make you laugh. They want you to be happy. This life is to be enjoyed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know all about that. But we are at the last commercial break of the night. But we'll be right back after the short commercial break as we continue talking about life after death and more phone calls and chat questions. We'll be right back.
Get your head down. I will tell you. Keep your head up. And I will hold you closer. I will hold you close. Take your questions by the millions. Put your coat on. Steal your kiss.
Do you need music for your radio show, podcast, or YouTube channel but need a music license to play it on your show? Well, go to artlist.io and check out the plans they have. They have 3 plans to choose from: personal, unlimited, and enterprise. All the music that you hear on the show is from Artlist, and there is a banner ad on the show's website. Check it out today. Do you love the strange, unusual, and weird unexplained mysteries? Do you like reading about the paranormal and other happenings? Well, I have the website for you, unexplainedmysteries.com. On there you will find so much such as the latest news and articles, forums, news with video, and so much more. That's unexplained-mysteries.com, or you can click on the banner ad on the show's website to take you right there. Do you love history? Do you wonder what happened on this day in history? Well, check out history.com/this day in history and find out what happened on this day in recorded history. You can also click on the image on the Talk of the Night website under This Day in History and check out one of the many things that happened. The show's website lists a different event in history every day, so check it out today.
I built up walls like mansions to the sky. Protect my heart so it would survive. But you climbed in like no one else could do. The day I knew I needed you. I was drifting out, safe from any shore. Didn't want to get hurt.
Call into the show, Skype Talk in the Night, or by phone at 817-717-1280. Now back to Talk in the Night with your host, Paranormal Phil.
Okay, and we are back with my guest, Nick Pease, as we talk about life after death and his book and all the questions. Now, again, the phone lines are open. If you got a question for my guest and want to call in, use Skype name Talk in the Night or by phone at 817-717-1280. I'll bring you on and let you ask him. Or if you go over to Spreaker.com, sign up for a free account. It don't cost a thing. You can chat with me. Just click on the live show. After you sign up, go to Talk in the Night, click on the live show, and pop in the chat. I got people in there talking about the show and different things about tonight's topic and everything like that. So I enjoy that and enjoy the questions. And if I don't get to the questions, maybe I can answer them on Friday night open lines. But let's get into more questions. Let's go to the chat here. How can we get past our fears to develop our psychic gifts, such as channeling and so forth?
Well, yeah, I think that's one of the great disappointments is that over the centuries, certain trains of thought have built up a fear in people of the spirit world, and there are certain trains of thought as well that say it's wrong to touch spirit, etc., etc. Whereas going back way back in time, ancient cultures found this very, very natural. It's difficult if you have a fear of spirit. It's a shame because there is nothing to be afraid of if you protect yourself, but you do have to protect yourself because there are darker energies out there. I don't think they'll harm you necessarily, but there are darker energies in the spiritual realms, and you have to protect yourself. I think I would always counsel people to try, if you want to develop in a psychic way, is to do so with people that have built enormous trust in that area. So, for example, when I went to the Spiritualist Association of Great Britain in London, very credible people working with some of the best mediums of the day, people who take it very seriously, who treat it with respect, and will take care of you and will ensure that you do it in the right way. I would always advise people to do that and not necessarily just strike out on your own. You can do it that way. Of course you can. There's no right or wrong. But that would always be my advice. Seek out people who really know what they're doing and can help you and look after you.
All right. Now, I think this is probably going to be my last question on the book because we covered a lot, and I don't want to spoil too much of the book, and I want people to purchase the book and read it for themselves. But are there any plans for further books or follow-ups on this one?
Yeah, I'm writing another one. I may not write a sequel, as it were, to Revelation because it kind of self-fulfills. But that's not to say that there couldn't be. But no, the book I'm writing at the moment centers around reincarnation, which is a subject that absolutely fascinates me. So I think I will always write books that have a spiritual angle, and that's what I'm doing at the moment.
All right. Now, this question comes from Michelle. Do you believe in the law of attraction?
Up to a point. It's there is certainly aspects of being able to put yourself out to the universe, to manifest things, to ask and ye shall receive, as it were, and there is that. But again, there is a note of caution to be struck there, because from the spiritual point of view, you won't always get what you want, because what you want may not be the best for you in terms of your life's development. So you could certainly put it out there. You could certainly put it out to the universe and manifest it and try and make things happen for you in that way. And there is certainly evidential evidence to suggest that it does work for some people. But it's not going to be a cover-all, I'm afraid, because, as we know, there are things we want in life, whether it be personal things, relationships, where you want to live, etc. It may not be in your best interests at that time to actually get that. There is something in ask and ye shall receive. Yes, there is, but only if it is in your best interest. So my answer is a bit mixed. It's yes, I do believe in it up to a point, but it has to be couched within the realms of what is best for your spiritual development. You can't just manifest or believe I want a Ferrari and that's going to come to you. It's not a kind of universal shopping mall. It's very different, and it comes with different layers. So I'm sorry to be a bit vague on that, but it is a kind of yes and no answer. Yes, there is strength in it because we all are all linked to that universal energy. We can put our thoughts out to the universe and to spirit and to ask for things if they are good things to ask for. But whether you get them or not in the way that you would want is a different matter.
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned before the show, I was talking about Coast to Coast AM. I think they used to do a thing when like a hurricane was coming in. They would have all the listeners kind of put their energy together to try and steer that hurricane away from land and stuff like that, and put that energy out there.
Yeah.
And I think that's possible. I mean, I don't know what your take is on something like that.
Again, big subject. It's hard to prove, isn't it? Because if that does happen, was it those people or wasn't it? And I think that's the difficulty with it. Those areas are open to people to either believe in or not and take from it what they want. There are certainly people I know myself who have used the law of attraction and tried to manifest things, and it has worked for them. But equally, I do know a lot of people who've tried it and it hasn't worked for them. And then they're left frustrated, disappointed, and wondering why. And I often have to say to them, well, maybe it wasn't in your best spiritual interests for that to happen in your life, because there are other life lessons for you to learn. So it's not straightforward.
Yeah, they're talking amongst themselves about astral projection. I mean, I've still got a ways to go down the list on all the questions. But if I want to mention this, if you go back to listen to last night's show, we talked about astral travel and astral projection, so you can hear about that show. So we're not going to get into that question in this show.
But it just shows how vast these subject areas are.
Yeah. Now, while I'm looking for a question, let me go back to the thing. Now, what is some advice for someone who is inspired to write a book?
Well, first, just do it. There's nothing like creating things, whether you're a novelist, an artist, a musician, whatever. I think it's one of the great gifts of being human is to create something and leave something for others to enjoy. I think what I would always say is, if you're writing a novel, which I assume is the reason behind the question, make sure you've got a really good story, a really good concept. Make sure it's something that will really grab people's interests, and then imbue it with very interesting characters, people that others can relate to and follow their lives. I think it's the basis of a good story is where there is a kind of inner struggle, where people are trying to achieve something, whatever your story might be, whether it's a romance, whether it's a thriller, whatever it might be. And it's overcoming odds to get to the conclusion. But what I would say is just start by get the idea and then just make notes, just like I did with a notepad. Just put down notes of how the structure will be. You can always change it later. Just wherever you are, you could be sitting of an evening, just in an armchair or whatever you're doing, and just take notes. Just think of thoughts and how things work. And then just work at it, work at the chronology of how the events are going to work, how characters are going to come into it. But get your basic story down. I think the essence of I wrote the blurb on the back of my book, for example, which is only 3 paragraphs long. If you can summarize your book like that, then you're probably onto something. You've probably got something and if it can grab people's interest, you've got it. But just please do it, because it will fulfill you so much.
Yeah, like me, I started writing a book on the paranormal dark side because I've had so many experiences with that side of the spirit world. But I just never got back to it. I've also started working on a screenplay, which I still got to get back to on that horror movie screenplay. but the book is more telling people about that side of the spirit world, telling them how to avoid that spirit side,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. That's what I eventually want to get that book out, but I'm so busy nowadays with this show, 5 days a week, not only hosting the show, but booking the guest, sound engineer, producer, webmaster, production crew, promotion crew. I mean, it's so much to do.
That is a problem. We all get so busy with our everyday lives, and I have a very hectic career in advertising, which I love, but it's all working to deadlines. So getting that time, I actually took a week out in a way to write Revelation, to write the basics of it, and I think to some extent that's what you have to do. You have to close yourself away. I hope you will finish your book, Phil, and maybe that's what you need to do, is just go away for a week, or do something where you just say, no, this is book time. I'm going to take this week and I'm going to write it.
Yeah. I think I will one of these times. Now, how can we better connect with our spirit guides? And this is a question from the chat.
Yeah, well, it is there for you if you want it. Again, I would say do it carefully. You can open yourself up to spirit. All you have to do is ask. It's, after all, what Jesus taught his disciples, is just to open up to God as he would describe it. I talk about the Great Spirit. You'll talk about your own faith or no faith. But just open up to those dimensions. Ask. Always ask for protection. Ask for the light to be around you. And then sit in quiet meditation. Meditation is the absolute doorway to it. But if you want to open up to your guides and helpers, then it's not just meditation, it's spiritual meditation. And yes, there is a difference. And to do that, I would advise seeking out people who really know what they're doing, can protect you and look after you. And what a lot of people will do if they want to develop in that way is what we call sit in circle, where you literally do sit on chairs in a circle with the combined energy of all those in the room. And you will have a very experienced spiritual medium who will take that circle and who will guide you through the proper way to meditate, so that you can open yourself up to spirit, and so that you do it in a way that is protected, safe, and allows communication to take place in a very controlled and happy way. I wouldn't personally, this is just my view, I wouldn't just plunge into it on your own. I would always seek the advice of people who've been there and are experienced and can look after you and guide you along the way.
Yeah, I know all about that. To give you an experience and everything like that, I was at a place in Beverly Hills, a home that sits 150 feet away from where the Manson murders happened.
Yeah.
And they did ghost tours, and one lady, they had rented out the house next door to that house where the tours were going on, because that house had not the house that was doing the ghost tours, but the other house was there on the night that the murders happened.
Yeah.
So it had that darker energy, whereas the house where the tours originated out of had that lighter energy. But the person had gone into the house and came out feeling physically ill and everything like that.
Yeah.
And you mentioned about go to somebody that has had that experience. Well, she was new to her empathic abilities, and I told her, I knew, well, they called me over because I was watching like 16 or 24 different cameras because I'm the tech, I was the tech guy. But so I was outside in the garage, so that way I was free to go out there and everything like that.
Yeah.
And she was physically feeling ill, so like upset to her stomach and everything like that. After coming out of the house, and I told her, okay, here's what I want you to do. Stand up, close your eyes, take a couple of deep breaths, and then imagine the brightest white light that you can imagine. And of course, she did that, and instantly she felt better. Of course, I was projecting some of that white light off of me onto her, but like you mentioned, go to somebody that has experienced that or has experience in that to help you along, because if you try to do it on your own, it's going to take a long time, and you might not get it right. You might get it right. You might get lucky and get it right, but there's no guarantee that you are.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, it was good that you were there for that lady, because these things can happen. And it can happen if you're sitting in meditation alone and you're not fully developed and you're just beginning. You might attract all kinds of things. And it's just, as I say, it's not necessarily going to harm you, but just to be sure that you just attract the light. And that's something that you have to learn how to do in many ways, because certainly when I was growing up, it was just I was being bombarded with, but when I got to see spirits with all kinds of visitations, and that's when you learn to control it. Then you feel totally secure, totally safe. And I would say that to people, that if you do develop in the right way with the right guidance, in the light, there is absolutely nothing to worry about.
Yeah, see, like me, I started up with kind of a technique that I learned to help me open my third eye and everything like that. And I mean, it's just one aspect of things, but I would go out like in the country and stuff like that and just sit there with no music. I don't have to use music. I mean, you can use nature around you, and I find that the best meditation tool out there. But I would go out there and listen to like the wind blowing through the trees, the birds chirping, and other sounds. And what I would do is take one sound a week and cut it out to where I didn't hear it at all. And then, but it wasn't a once and done process. And a lot of people think, oh, well, if I do this, I can do it in one day or 1 week. And that, no, it took me several years just to learn to do that.
Oh, absolutely. That's the thing to, and indeed it's a lifelong development, but, the same with me, Phil. It took me, although I could naturally see and hear spirits, to actually control it and to develop properly as a spiritual medium did take several years.
All right, now we're running out of time here. Now, where can people find out more information about you and your book?
Well, the book is available online through all the usual outlets. Dare I mention people like Amazon, etc. And I don't know what bookstores would be available in the States, but we have people like Waterstones and Blackwell's. It's available on their online stores. But I think Amazon is pretty universal, isn't it? I know
pretty much.
There are people in the States who've already bought it off Amazon, and that's probably the best way. As for me as well, at the back of the book, I added a bit from the author, which you'll see is very much about me and my experience, which I thought I wanted to add so that when people read the book and then they read that bit, they'll understand me more, how I come at things, and my spiritual experience and everything, my philosophy, etc. So that gives them a real insight. That's at the back of the book.
Okay, yeah, because one of the questions was, can we get his book from Amazon? But of course you answered that, and I knew you were going to answer that. I was psychic. I knew. But no, I knew that question was going to come up anyway, so that's why I didn't ask it. But anyways, there's so much out there. Now, you mentioned working a regular 9-to-5 job, basically. And stuff as a copyright and stuff like that, and of course writing the book. Now, do you do anything as far as like in this, besides working on the book or your regular job, do you do anything in the spirit world as far as like readings or teaching classes or anything like that?
I don't tend to do that at the moment. I did many years ago. I was very active on the spiritual circuits, did a lot of talks, public speaking, helping people to develop. But that was a long time ago. I think my now it's much more. I'm doing it more from a almost like a scholastic interest. I'm doing a lot of research myself into the whole area of spiritual philosophy and spirituality. If I know of somebody who's been bereaved, for example, I will try and help them, and they can always talk to me, and I will try and give them evidence of life after death. But that's, as I say, that's not how I make my living. That's just done as out of respect
Just
and
like
love
a
for the
hobby
individual concerned.
and enjoying doing that kind of work and stuff like that, rather than trying to do it for a living. Like me,
Absolutely.
Me, this radio show is my work. I'm pretty much retired, so I can do this. But I do need to make money, but I also do love doing it because it gives me a chance to give people different perspectives on different topics.
Exactly.
It opens the discussion and everything like that.
Yeah. That's great. We all have to make a living. I'm fortunate to have carved a career in advertising that I enjoy and love, and so that's what I do. But so my spiritual life is kind of outside my professional life.
All right. Well, I want to thank you again for coming on the show, talking about your book, sharing your experiences, and answering, of course, the questions from me and my listeners. And I also want to thank my listeners for the questions as well, because without those questions, I probably would have ran out of time.
From my point of view, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you to everybody who has listened to this, and to those who do happen to get my book, Revelation. I really hope you enjoy it, and I hope it inspires you in some way. So thank you all very much. Right. And thank you, Phil.
Uh-huh. You have a good night, because I know it's early morning there. It's night here. Like 6 hours, but I want to thank you again. And for those listening to the show right now, and also anybody that listens later on to the recording, tomorrow night I will be joined by my guest, Barbara With, as we talk about psychic channeling. We'll get into psychic abilities and readings. We'll also be talking about her book, Einstein, ETL, Manifestations, Conflict Resolution, and New Operating System, which talks about Einstein's view about death and so much more. And then, of course, Thursday night, we're going to be joined by two guests, Tyler Transu and Chris Rupert, as we get into talking about the whole UFO alien story and sightings and everything like that, with their film Conscious Contact, Full Disclosure. And we're also going to talk about another film of theirs, Secrets of the Sasquatch, which I think all of it is intertwined with the aliens, Bigfoot, and other cryptids, and the spirit world. But we'll talk about that on Thursday. And then, of course, Friday night is Friday night open lines, where you can call in, share your stories, experiences, or ask questions. So thank you again. And until tomorrow night with my guest, Barbara With, as we get into psychic channeling, I shall see you on the dark side. Good night from Talking the Night. Darkness has fallen. Turn on the radio, and you hear him talking. Listening what he has to say, all about paranormal and all of the things. When he sounds off, you can hear